Coming to you from Southern California, this is Mindset, mental health news and information. I'm your host, James Curtis. On today's show,
look at overeating might seem like it's a very simple behavior, and people might say, well, just stop doing it. Just stop putting food in your mouth. But overeating is actually a very complex behavior, and it requires a comprehensive, multidimensional approach.
In recognition of Mental Health Awareness Month this May, we're examining some of perhaps the less thought of mental health issues today. Our relationship with food. My guest, psychotherapist Julie Simon, that was her voice you heard there in the clip. But first, this news from the Mindset Report. The Mindset Report, available online at mindsetreport.com. The Mindset Report, your most comprehensive online source for mental health news. The Mindset Report today is underwritten by Responsibility, a complete guide to bystander intervention by Alan Berkowitz, who is committed to the idea that the solution to social justice problems requires that we engage as bystanders. Responsibility is available online at lulu.com. Lulu spelled L-U-L-U. A federal case that may, in the long run, prove to be a massively important legal decision for victims and families of victims who have a mental illness and who, because of their illness, become violent when they come in contact with police, and has suffered an apparent setback this week, an emphasis on apparent. That is a setback to the case. Reporter Lyle Denniston for the SCOTUS blog, SCOTUS, the acronym for the Supreme Court of the United States, wrote this about the decision. Amid an emotional national debate over claims that police are too quick to use excessive force, the Supreme Court ruled on Monday that officers have some leeway to fire their guns to subdue a person with a mental illness who is violently threatening them. The incident in question arose in August of 2008 when a San Francisco City social worker called the police after he had been threatened by Teresa Sheehan. He had gone to check on Ms. Sheehan at the group home where she was living. Police Sergeant Kimberly Reynolds and Officer Catherine Holder came to the social worker's assistance when Ms. Sheehan refused to open the door to the officers. They let themselves in with a key provided by the social worker. Ms. Sheehan came at the officers with a knife, making death threats of the same kind she had made to the social worker just a few minutes earlier. After calling for backup, the officers then decided they could not wait any longer to deal with Ms. Sheehan and entered the room again, this time with guns drawn. After Ms. Sheehan could not be subdued with pepper spray, the officers opened fire, wounding but not killing her. She later sued for claimed violations of the Fourth Amendment and the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, the 1990 law that requires government programs to take steps to accommodate the disabled. After the city government lost in the United States Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit on both of the issues Ms. Sheehan had raised, San Francisco officials took the case up to the Supreme Court. In Monday's decision, the court ruled that, partially in their favor, the officers did not violate the Constitution on their first entry to Ms. Sheehan's room, and that the use of force on entering the room the second time was indeed, quote, reasonable. But it did not decide whether the two officers were liable on Ms. Sheehan's constitutional claim that the officers were required to accommodate her mental condition when they used force. A former colleague of mine, attorney John Burris, is one of Ms. Sheehan's lawyers. I caught up with him yesterday and asked him how he saw the Supreme Court's ruling.
The facts themselves are such that the court said the law is not well established, that they should have gone into the room a second time. The first time was clear that everyone agreed. When they come back the second time, the position was that they were in a position of safety and they shouldn't have opened the door and gone in and created a confrontation. The court essentially said the law was not well established on whether or not they should have gone back in. But the real significance for our point of view and for people who represent the plaintiffs is that the court did not decide the question about the applicability of the ADA, the liability of the ADA to the city, which then means that we will have a court hearing to determine whether the city itself is liable under the ADA for the damages that occurred to the client. And this is important, and it allows for the ADA to be clear that a police officer can, in fact, be responsible, and the city can be responsible if a police officer fails to make reasonable accommodations when they are confronting a person who is mentally ill, but they had fair notice that she was mentally impaired. What that means is, like in our own individual case, the city was aware, that is to say, the police officer was aware when they went there that this was a mentally impaired person, and therefore she was subject to Section 2 of the ADA, which means they had to provide reasonable accommodation. And the court, even in this court, says that you can, in fact, make reasonable accommodations for a person who is a danger to themselves and danger to the other if you have fair notice and you have the opportunity to do so. So even though the officers themselves were let go, the principle, the most important principle, in fact, is still in effect. That is that a person who is mentally impaired can fall within the protection of the ADA, and the police officers have to make reasonable accommodations if they are aware of the person's situation, and they have an opportunity to do so. So, in that sense, it was not a total defeat by any stretch of imagination. We had best hoped for a remand of the entire case, and it turns out that Justice Scalia wanted to do that, return the case back to the Ninth Circuit. We had won this case on the appellate court, where the court there says that the police are subject to follow ADA and a mentally impaired person and make reasonable accommodations if they're in a position to do so. That's a factual question. And they also said that the officer should not be entitled to a qualified immunity. However, the Supreme Court chose to do that otherwise. So they kicked out the officer. But the lesson of the case for me, and the most important aspect of it, is that the issue of the ADA does apply for mentally impaired people when they are confronted by the police. So it's a victory for us in that sense, and not for me personally, but for mentally impaired people who may fall within the benefits and the subject and language of the ADA. So in that sense, the court did not strike that down, and so we will have a trial at a later time on the question of the liability of the city under the ADA.
California Attorney John Burris represents Teresa Sheehan in San Francisco versus Sheehan. My friend, thank you so much for taking the time.
Oh, thank you. Good to be with you.
Back with today's topic, overeating. Our main topic, it's not about the food. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to Mindset, Mental Health News and Information. I'm your host, James Curtis. Today's topic, overeating. Whether we do it a little bit or are slightly overweight or live with the severity of something like bulimia. The problem is not necessarily about the food, not necessarily. My guest is Julie Simon. She's an MA, a master's in clinical psychology. She's got a MBA, a master's in business administration, marriage and family therapist, licensed, and she's just really smart. You graduated summa cum laude from UCLA, Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology.
Yeah, I did psychology and biology. I ended up getting my major in psychology, but I spent a lot of time in psychology and biology.
You're a really impressive individual, and I'm just so thrilled that, one, that you're doing this work, that you're bringing all of your considerable talent to bear on this issue. And psychology and psychotherapy generally, and this specific issue, at the bottom or at the heart of the base of psychological or emotional eating, is it a compulsion addiction issue? Is that a useful way to think about this?
Well, that's a good question. It really depends on the person and how their eating plays out. So the way I would look at it is that overeating is on a continuum, and so the least destructive form of, or the least compulsive form of overeating is what I call a non-compulsive overeater. And so that's the person who tends to eat a little too much at meals, maybe grabs snacks a little more often than is healthy for her body, maybe, has an extra dish of ice cream at night. But she doesn't feel compelled to finish the carton. If she eats a cookie or two, she doesn't feel like she has to have 20. She's not compulsive, but usually would like to lose some weight, feels her eating is a little bit over the top, and maybe, at holiday times, eats a little bit more, and there's probably an emotional component to her eating. The next category would be a compulsive overeater, and some compulsive overeaters will fit the description of what we call binge eating disorder. So some people will be compulsive overeaters, and they'll say, I kind of compulsively, ate that whole bag of cookies. But in general, they're not having binges daily or with any real regularity, but their eating does have a compulsive component. And some of those people will say, the only time I'm compulsive is with certain foods. So that's where we might see an addiction coming in. And then you have people that are binge eating disorder, and they can be compulsive with anything. They can even be binging on their non-favorite foods. So a binge eater often doesn't have a lot of food in the house, and maybe during a binge might say, you know what, I don't even like my husband's cornflakes, and but I put cornflakes together with chocolate chips and milk, and I had a binge. So we go from non-compulsive, we go to compulsive, binge eating disorder, and then we have bulimia, which is also has a compulsive component to it, compulsive binging and compulsive purging, which could be over-exercising or vomiting up meals or laxatives and diuretics or fasting, starving. So there is, on the spectrum of overeating or emotional eating, there certainly are people who are compulsive with their food. And I think that's the most painful condition, the people that feel the compulsions. And so when we're working with compulsive overeating, we have to look at both of the emotional component, what emotionally is driving the eating, but we also have to look, and some people don't do this, and it's part of what I include in my program, we also have to look at what people are eating, aren't actually eating, because sometimes the foods that we're most drawn to might be causing addiction, and we also might be drawn to them because we're self-medicating. We need certain foods to increase our brain chemicals, right? So there's a lot to look at. Overeating might seem like it's a very simple behavior, and people might say, well, just stop doing it. Just stop putting food in your mouth. But overeating is actually a very complex behavior, and it requires a comprehensive, multidimensional approach.
And to that extent, it sounds like the idea of addressing this issue, the issue of overeating, wherever we happen to find ourselves on the spectrum, from non-compulsive overeating to the compulsive binge overeating, that your approach is what I've heard from a lot of other mental health professionals in terms of not only the spectrum aspect of it, but looking at sort of the outcome, the downside, and that is you need to do something about it if it's negatively impacting your life. Am I understanding that correctly?
Well, I think anybody who struggles with their eating and has either extra weight on their body or physical symptoms from their eating, not feeling well, health challenges. Those are the people that are motivated to contact me because they don't like their weight or their body image. Or they might say, you know what, my weight isn't so terrible, but my health is suffering. I've been told that I'm pre-diabetic, or I'm having sleep trouble, or they're in midlife and now they're not feeling too well from their eating. So that's when people start to come see me because something's not working anymore. Often they've tried, numerous diets before they've come to see me, and sometimes even with success. I've had people come to me and they say, I did Weight Watchers for a number of years. I lost 80 pounds. I was doing really well. I don't know why I gained the weight back, and I can't seem to get back to doing it, or I can't get back to Weight Watchers. Or people come to me and they say, this particular eating plan used to really work for me. Now it doesn't. I'm 20 pounds heavier than my heaviest that I've ever been. And I always help them understand that it's because a diet mentality ultimately doesn't address emotional eating. You can only keep yourself on a restricted eating plan for so long if you're an emotional eater before, your emotional material is going to come up and you're going to want to go to your favorite best friend comfort foods to deal with those emotional issues. So that's typically why people end up in my office.
Talk to me about the idea of perception. My sense is this, and that is there's a really huge, or at least a significant, negative sensibility about the idea of eating disorder. And to the extent that it may be a scientific term, a term that you find in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the DSM, does that cause people problems if they think, I can't go to a psychologist, a mental health professional for this. I need to, I should be able to manage this with the diet. Is that a barrier to folks because they don't want to make that association that it's a problem on a psychological level?
I think it might be at an early point in someone's eating challenges. But I actually think that by the time someone is seeking out a psychotherapist, for their issues, they've usually been struggling with this. And they can be young. I mean, people come to see me. I have people that are, in their teens who come and work with me or take my 12-week program. I have people that are in their 80s who come to me. So it's all ages of the spectrum. I would say the majority of people, though, are like late 20s to late 60s, because those are the ages when, by the time someone's in her late 20s, she's already tried those diets. She's tried things, and she's already seen that she kind of can't get this together on her own. Same with the people who are in their 50s and 60s. Like I said, they've tried a lot of things. They're beginning to think, there's something here that I can't seem to get a handle on. And what I love to tell people when they call me and they come in is that they're just missing some skills. I say, you know what, you're just missing some skills, and I can teach you the skills. It's not so difficult. I can teach you the skills. I can, show you some things that you might not be doing with your diet, and we can get this moving. And I give people hope, and I think that's what everyone wants. It reminds me of this weekend I was at a parenting workshop, and the facilitator was talking about how, the parents come in and, you don't get any education when you give birth. You're new parents. Nobody really teaches you how to manage children. And if you've got problems from your past, your own stuff is coming through when you're parenting, you don't know what you're doing. Maybe you're blowing your top all the time. So she gets these parents in and she says, I'm just going to give you some skills, that you probably didn't gather along the way. How to manage your own emotions with your child, and how to manage your child's emotions. And so it's the same thing when people come to me. I say, you know what? You're just missing skills. It's not that you're so damaged, or there's so much wrong with you. You know, you have a lot that's right with you already. I'm just going to enhance that by teaching you how to take better care of yourself emotionally, cognitively, spiritually, and physically.
And let's drill down into some of those skills. And if you're just joining me, my guest is Julie Simon. She is so many things that it's hard to really get it into a nice, clean soundbite, because you have such an incredibly rich background with all the stuff that you've done. But suffice to say, you are, among other things, a marriage and family therapist. You are a psychotherapist and life coach who focuses on overeating. The idea of skills dealing with the issues of overeating, you've synthesized into sort of a 3-part approach. Give us that.
Well, basically, I've been running a 12-week program for close to 25 years for overeaters. I work with a lot of other conditions than overeating, and a lot of overeaters have those other issues like mood disorders and relationship challenges, and those are the kind of things that are underneath the overeating. So for nearly 25 years, I've been running a 12-week program for emotional eaters, overeaters. And the book that I wrote is based on the 12-week program. I wrote the book because I felt that people come to my program in Los Angeles and get lots of benefit, but there are people all over the world who weren't privy to my approach because they're not in Los Angeles. So I thought, let me write a book that covers the 12-week program, and then turn that into a teleseminar series so that people in Germany and people in Africa and people in Australia, can participate. They can read the book. They can get a very inexpensive version of the program, and then they can sign up for a teleseminar and get lectures and coaching with me. And so basically what we do in the program and in the book is we cover 3 areas. We cover the mind, we cover the body, and we cover the spiritual imbalances that lead us to turn to food. And so what I like to say to people is that we were all born with this incredible, phenomenal machine that gives us a multitude of signals every day that help us stay in balance, right? And so every single day we have signals from our mind, and we call those emotions. And they're precious signals. They're like street signs that guide us to our needs. We also have another kind of mind signal, and those are thoughts. And our thoughts can be positive and powerful and energizing, or our thoughts can be hopeless and negative and critical and judgmental and self-defeating. So we have those signals every day. Emotions every day. Today I'm sad, today I'm happy, today I'm angry, today I'm lonely. We have, research says we have, some deep thinkers have up to 90,000 thoughts a day. The average person has somewhere between 12 and 15,000 thoughts a day. So we've got a lot of mind signals going on all day. We also have this incredible machine gives us body signals every single day. It gives us hunger signals. It gives us cravings to help guide our selection of foods. It gives us fullness signals. There are receptor cells embedded in your stomach. They're called stretch cells. They stretch. And they're there to give you a stretch signal and tell you that your body has had enough food now. You also have caloric density receptors in your stomach. You have nutrient density receptors. All of these behind-the-scenes calculations that your body, your phenomenal, incredible body is making to help turn on your appetite hormones, the appetite-stimulating hormone ghrelin that turns on your appetite, leptin, the braking hormone, turns off your appetite so you don't get overweight and sluggish and get eaten by a predator, right? So the body is incredibly wise, giving us these signals. We get signals like fatigue and inflammation and pain. And then we get spiritual signals like passion and purpose and excitement and hope and joy, or signals from our spirit like emptiness and hopelessness and meaninglessness and apathy, right? So my whole program and the work I do in general is to teach people to be mindful of the signals, right? What signal is your body sending you? What signal is your mind sending you? And we learn to pay attention to all those signals. And then, people will say, okay, well, if I pay attention to them, what do I do with them, right?
Right. Why am I running to the refrigerator and grabbing the Ben and Jerry's? And I know, not only I'm not necessarily all that hungry, but it might be all right to take a couple of scoops out. But no, I'm grabbing the whole pint. I'm sitting down, and I'm on a mission. I'm getting through this.
Right.
Right.
And that's when I say to someone, okay, so some of the skills that I teach. So let's say, if there's any time that maybe you are hungry, okay, but you're wanting to choose unhealthy comfort foods, right? So you're finding that for breakfast, you don't want to eat a healthy breakfast. You want to have cookies and ice cream for breakfast. Or you're eating when you're not hungry. Like you said, you had a little treat of ice cream, but now, you had plenty of food and you're going back for more. Or you're just consistently overeating at meals, or you're snacking mindlessly. If that's the case, I ask people before they go for that next dish of ice cream to pull back and to do what I have a little 3-step process that I call an inner conversation. I ask people to take a few minutes, give yourself permission to go get the ice cream afterwards. So there's no restriction, nobody's putting any limits on you. Take a few minutes and check in with yourself, okay? So the 3-step process looks like this. So you're driving home from work, you've had a pretty rough week, rough day, and you think to yourself, I'm going to go through the drive-through, right? And you kind of know you're going to do some damage. You're going to get a cheeseburger and fries and an ice cream and a Coke. And so I say, okay, give yourself permission that it's okay to go do that at the drive-through, but go in the parking lot first. And just, if you have a piece of paper, just take it out. It's something that helps if we write these things down. Just start out by writing what you're feeling. Just become mindful. What are you feeling? Some person says, I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling frustrated. I'm feeling angry at my boss. I'm feeling exhausted. I'm feeling worried about my job. I'm feeling lonely because I live alone. The person's feeling all these emotions, right? Now, just even that first step, just connecting to yourself in a kind, loving way can go a long way. I call it self-connection. It's like instead of just being kind of on automatic pilot driving home from work, zoom, in like a zone of a fog, you just start to connect to yourself. There's a feeling self in there, that is just full of emotions. And you're just beginning to say, hey, what's going on inside of there? Next step, what do I need when I feel like this, when I'm feeling sad and frustrated and empty and lonely and angry? What do I need? Do I really need a cheeseburger and fries? I mean, is that really what I'm needing? What are my non-food needs? So the person stops and realizes, well, and often emotional eaters will say to me, I don't know what I'm feeling, number one. And number two, they often say, I have the faintest idea what I need. Okay, well, if you don't know what you need, nobody else can know what you need. So you can figure out what you need. And in my book and in my program, I have charts of needs to help you figure out what you need. The person sits down and says, I guess what I need is calming because I'm kind of anxious. I need some reassurance that I'm doing a good job, maybe some validation. I guess I need some comfort and some soothing. I feel kind of agitated and uptight. All right, so if we just stop for a second and we think about those needs, it's not really a cheeseburger and fries. I mean, yeah, that'll kind of numb you out because those foods are
delicious
loaded with sugar.
And wonderful.
They're delicious. They're loaded with fat and sugar and salt, and they'll shoot up your brain chemicals and give you a nice, blissful feeling, for sure. But one thing we can all agree on is that they're not going to solve the problem. They're not going to fix what's going on with your job. They're not going to solve your personal life. And, in fact, they'll destroy your health and they'll destroy your self-esteem. So the next step, and this is all 3 steps are very, very important, and this 3-step process I created is very strategic because the first 2 steps force you to become mindful of of yourself, of what am I actually feeling in life.
Because you have to stop. You have to really
You have to stop
and just take a moment. And when you're taking this moment, it can be just free flowing. Whatever comes to your mind in terms of that need that's not food, that's what you should be jotting down. This is not something you have to really study or, take 30 minutes to do.
Right. And it's just like you say, just what comes to your mind. I need friends. I need support. I need more meaning. I need more care. I need some good listening. I need someone to talk to, whatever it is. And the third step, which is really critical because it forces you to access what I call your inner nurture, an inner nurturing voice. Now, again, a lot of emotional eaters don't have this voice very well developed. It's a voice that you use when you talk to small children. It's a voice that you use when you talk to animals. It's a very kind, loving, caring, sweet voice. We need to access this voice. So we need to feel like there's someone inside of us that's a mature adult that can help us meet our needs, right? The person says, I'm feeling all these feelings. These are the things I need, comfort and soothing and reassurance. Access that inner nurture voice. The inner nurture voice comes on and says, and she starts to validate, oh, gosh, it makes so much sense that you're feeling so anxious and agitated from work. Work's been really hard lately. Your boss has been riding you really hard, and you're not feeling like this job is a good fit anymore. And so you're feeling frustrated about that, and you're not sure you can make a change and figure out which way to go. Of course you're feeling all those feelings, and it makes sense to be feeling all those feelings. And I want you to know that I'm here with you, and I love you, and I care about you. I'm the highest part of you. I'm with you all the time. I'm closer to you than your breath. And I can help you. I can help you. I can comfort you. I can soothe you. I can tell you how incredible and awesome and wonderful you are. And together, we can figure this out. Together, we can figure this out. And by the way, what if we went home tonight and we just made a healthy dinner? And after we eat our healthy dinner, we can sit down and we can just think about what we would rather be doing than being at this job, right? So the key is to the mindfulness of the emotions and the needs. The emotions are those street signs that lead you to your needs. Then to be able to really identify our needs, and then to bring in this inner nurturing voice and begin strengthening that voice. And that's the voice that's also going to help you reframe some of those negative self-defeating thoughts. So when you have a thought that says, I'll never be able to get out of this job, I don't have any other skills, that voice comes in and says, we don't have to ever stay stuck in something that's not working for us. And I love you and I care about you, and we can together find a way to do some kind of work that's more satisfying. We can, and we will, right? To learn that positive, uplifting voice inside. And a lot of people need a lot of help with that. Most emotional eaters have come from backgrounds that often weren't that nourishing or that nurturing, and they don't have a very well-developed inner nurturer. They've got what I call a very well-developed inner critic, very strong, critical,
like a lot of us do.
Like a lot of us. And that's why I always say also my book isn't just for emotional eaters. I mean, you don't have to be an emotional eater. Anybody can read the book. And these skills are for everyone. You don't have to it doesn't have to be food.
And that's what I was going to ask you about. That's exactly what I was going to ask you about. That's where I was going to go next, as a matter of fact. It sounds like these are indeed strategies that apply to just life in general, to be able to stop and take a moment and figure out what's going on before you go do something that you probably shouldn't, whether that's
exactly
spending too much money.
It doesn't have to be food.
Yeah, whether it's spending too much money or drinking or, yelling at your kids or whatever it is. Because those destructive types of behaviors, even though they may be flare-ups and momentary, come from this kind of place where what you're yelling at or what you're taking it out on, whether it be food or otherwise, really probably isn't the issue. Do you agree with that? Is that accurate?
I do. That's why I say in the book, that you don't have to be an emotional eater to really benefit from the book, because the majority of skills that I'm covering, learning to connect to yourself and identify your emotions and your needs, developing an inner nurturing voice, catching and reframing self-defeating thoughts, that's for everyone. Learning how to self-soothe, that's for everyone. Learning how to grieve losses and disappointments, that's for everyone. Learning how to set better limits with yourself and boundaries with others, that's for everyone. And developing self-acceptance and unconditional self-love is for everyone. That's the first set of 5 self-care skills. Those are for everyone across the board, because everyone who comes to me, whether they're an emotional eater or they're a gambler or they're somebody, people come to me who aren't emotional eaters, people come to me with relationship challenges, couples issues, mood disorders. Everyone who comes to me needs these skills. They just do. They need to know how to unconditionally love themselves. They need to know how to reframe those thoughts. They need to know how to set better boundaries with people in their lives. They need to know how to set limits with themselves. They need to know how to activate themselves, how to connect to themselves in a loving, kind way. So these skills are for everyone. And even the second part of the book, which is all about the physical imbalances that lead us to use food, second part of the book, again, is for everyone, because all of us need to learn how to pay attention to our hunger and fullness cues. All of us need to learn how to, eat foods that are consistent with our human design. That's the second chapter in part 2. Learning how to add unprocessed whole plant foods to our eating plan. That's for everyone. That's for everyone. Everyone needs to be eating, whether you're an emotional eater or not, whether you're an overeater, whether you have even an ounce of extra weight on your body, you are going to have better health if you learn how to eat unprocessed whole or add unprocessed whole plant foods to your eating plan. So many of the illnesses, both emotional and physical, that people are suffering from today are because our eating is so full of processed food today, our eating plans, and so high in animal foods of animal origin. So that chapter is for everyone. Also, the next chapter is on body imbalances, food addiction, food allergies, hormonal imbalances. We also talk about stress reduction. That's for everybody. We talk about moving your body, how important it is to get the right amount of exercise, and how it's not as much as most people think they need. And the final chapter in part 2 is on sleep, getting rejuvenative, quality sleep, learning to sleep to satiation. So everything in the book, and we haven't even covered the spiritual part, is for all humans. Anybody could read it. I've had people write reviews where they've said, I got the book for myself. I'm a woman, struggling with overeating, but my husband read the book, and he's not an overeater, and he got so much out of it. So it really is for anyone.
And hence my idea. I think we do a new cover, same content, and you just put an X through the eaters part, and just put it'll be just the emotional repair manual. Or you could do an X through emotional and eaters. It's just the repair manual, the human being repair and maintenance guide, because this is great. This is great stuff. And if you're just joining me, my guest is Julie Simon. She's a licensed psychotherapist, life coach. She's so many other things. She's an incredibly talented, bright, capable individual who has focused her energies on, among other things, overeating, and she deals with a lot of the other issues that are associated with what we go through as human beings. And I want to talk about some of those in the few minutes we have remaining, Julie, in the context of the step about connecting with yourself, the step about being kind and non-judging about yourself. That can be a difficult step for folks. Talk about that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most difficult steps for people. I run groups, all week long, and I have people constantly saying negative, critical things about themselves. And some of these feelings, some of the thoughts, they'll have thoughts that are negative about themselves, but they'll also have with those thoughts these deep senses of themselves that go back a very long time. Someone was just saying to me recently, because she was raised by a very critical, shaming mother, she says, I just kind of feel like I'm a bad person. And I said, can you put your finger on anything that makes you a bad person? She said, no, I've actually done a lot in my life and I'm accomplished and blah, blah, blah. But deep inside, I feel like I'm a bad person. And so for a lot of us, we carry around with us feelings that, we heard it over and over, a parent criticizing us or shaming us or telling us we wouldn't amount to anything. Or my mother used to tell me over and over that I was argumentative. And it wasn't until probably I was, maybe out of college where I was able to work on that feeling I had that I was bad or that I was argumentative. And when I came to realize, and this is one of the ways I was able to unconditionally love and accept myself, was that her words weren't true. I wasn't argumentative, and I don't like to argue. I'm not someone who likes to argue. What she was labeling argumentative was that I was passionate, that I would take a stand for something I believed in. I wasn't argumentative. I was passionate. And that reframe really worked for me. And so for many of us, we've got these deep-seated beliefs about ourselves, and they're actually not even just beliefs, they're senses, they're felt senses about ourselves. And we have to kind of reroot them. We've got to uproot them. We've got to go inside, take a look at them, evaluate them in the light of day, and find a way to see ourselves as a whole. I don't care what your past is. I don't care if you did some bad deeds in the past. In my book, everyone is redeemable. There's redemption. We just have to find our way there. We have to find our way to making sense out of our past, making sense out of our journey, and learning how to love ourselves with our past and with our current flaws. And again, easier said than done, but there are steps. We won't have time to go into all of them, but when we're working on learning how to love ourselves, there are steps that we can take. And so, for example, one of them is I work with people on learning how to forgive themselves. Again, easy to say, but not easy to do. But how do you forgive yourself for past mistakes or failures? We work on one of the habits in terms of loving yourself is stop using comparisons to make yourself feel terrible, right? Use comparisons for inspiration and motivation only. So stop looking at that incredible woman's body and say, oh my God, she looks so great. I'm a piece of shit. I could never look good, right? Stop. Cancel that stuff out. Look at her and say, you go, girl, and see if you can be inspired.
And Julie Simon, you go. You are indeed inspiring. More of my interview with Julie Simon on the Extended Interview podcast. And you can check out the Mindset podcast on iTunes, iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, YouTube, and Spreaker. As always, if you like what we're doing here on Mindset, go to the website, mindsetshow.com. Buy something you were going to buy anyway. That's it for today's broadcast. Until next week, for Mindset, mental health news and information, I am your host, James Curtis. Dare to see mental health differently, because understanding why we do what we do helps us all do better. See you next week.
But they can do what they want whenever they want. I don't mind. I love myself. He said I gotta get up like it's more than suicide. I love myself. One day at a time. Sun gon' shine. And I love myself.